To meeting number 15 of the Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, created pursuant to the order of the House on March 2nd, 2022, and Senate on March 3rd, 2022. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House and Senate orders, and should any technical difficulties arise, please advise me, as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure that all members are able to fully participate. Any witnesses should be aware that translation is available through the globe icon at the bottom of their screen. We should note that today is a shorter meeting that will last for 2 hours with a hard stop at 8:30, an absolute hard stop on our deliberations at 8:30. It's a business meeting, so at this point in time, I'd like to open the floor. I recognize Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Picking up actually on your introduction, I'd like to understand why today is a business meeting. The importance of hearing from witnesses was repeated again and again, and I don't believe it's a partisan issue. Everybody around this table agreed that we needed to get down to work. The reality is that fully 1/3 of our meetings, 6 out of 15 meetings, we were dedicated to committee business rather than actually getting down to the work of that we were tasked as a committee. And I find that very disappointing. I understand that a work plan was circulated today. I received it today from the clerks. It is dated from May of last session. What is the current state of play for witnesses being scheduled? And would it be possible for the clerks to explain why exactly there were no witnesses that were available for what was scheduled as a 3-hour witness meeting today?
Okay, so I'll take your first question, which was directed, I believe, at the co-chairs who have the power to set the agenda for the meetings. As we had discussed in previous meetings, there have been challenges to get the prioritized witnesses concurrent with the judicial review. We just simply weren't getting cooperation out of those witness lists and having the difficult time of finding prioritized witnesses for this evening's meeting. On the second part, I'm happy to share that with the clerks if they'd like to.
Before we get to the questions for the clerks, is it your understanding, Mr. Chair, that witnesses are not interested in coming to our committee or are unavailable due to the inquiry? I'd like to get a better sense.
With specificity, the witness that we had lined up for today, somebody who is involved with the police service, and obviously, to my understanding, with the incidences that had occurred, it had required the attendance of many within the law enforcement community to attend a funeral. We did not want to impose on that or perhaps suggest that this committee would take precedence over that, honoring the tragedy that had occurred, and took the best course of action, which was to deal with ensuring that over the next 6 weeks, we have, in coordination with the judicial review, a schedule that is fulsome and one that is dedicated to witness lists to ensure that we can get to the business at hand. And of course, at the conclusion of those 6 weeks, the ratio that you had suggested, the 1/3 of meetings being set aside for committee business, that ratio would change dramatically. We'd be in the course of our business, and we'd be able to respond to many of the revelations and different dynamics that have been, I think, uncovered through the course of judicial review and the civil proceedings. As you know, it's been very difficult to get cooperative witnesses at this committee to be able to provide us with substantive answers and documents and many things that this committee has been trying to get. So as these other processes play out, it's our intention, through no fault of the clerks, that we will get the kind of scheduling that will have prioritized witnesses that would make sense for the work plan.
Okay. Certainly appreciate that the RCMP and police forces would be unavailable this week, but there is respectfully 10 pages of witnesses. So perhaps the clerks can let us know what the plan is going forward. And
that is the course of the business this evening, is to set course what the schedule is going to be on a prioritized basis for the next 6 weeks. And, as it relates to the clerks, I'd like to note that Miriam, our typical clerk, is not here tonight. And, Mark is here, but the bulk of the planning work had been between the two of them, so I don't necessarily want to put them on the spot. I'm happy to take responsibility as a chair to let you know that we're having a business meeting tonight, because that was the collective decision of the three chairs.
I understand, except that I think the clerk would have been in a position to answer my question with respect to the other witnesses.
Fair enough. So maybe, Mark, if you can.
Yeah, so for this evening, there was a number of witnesses called, police and others. When there was declinations, when they didn't come, we then went to the joint chairs to ask for a meeting. There was a meeting between the joint chairs, and that's when it was decided to have a business meeting tonight to go forward on that.
So no other witnesses were called?
There were a number of witnesses called. There was one confirmed for this evening, Mr. Bordelot, but the decision was made that one witness wouldn't have stood alone. That was the decision of the joint chairs. So to cancel that witness and then to have a business meeting.
No, to Ms. Bendayan, are there any?
Going forward, I certainly hope that when the committee decides that they would hear from a certain witness the following week, that if there were extraneous circumstances, that we would automatically go to this very long witness list and see who could come in order to maximize our time here. It seems to me that we have limited ourselves to a very short number of witnesses for tonight, and here we are finding that we have 2 hours of committee business. But I will let the chair proceed with this meeting, and I'll reserve comment.
Well, I appreciate you letting me proceed with the meeting. As the chair, I'll now do that. We'll move on to Senator Harder. Senator Harder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to express my support for the decisions of the co-chair with respect to the agenda tonight. And to facilitate a candid conversation, I would move that for the purpose of the discussing witnesses and the committee's work plan, we move in camera.
So you've heard the motion put on the floor to move in camera. Is there any debate on the motion?
No,
Oh, it's a non-debatable motion.
also, eh?
My apologies. It is a non-debatable.
May I suggest that we... Est-ce que je pourrais suggérer qu'on...
Can I suggest that we deal with the motion before we go in camera?
Comprends. OK.
Motion.
Inaudible for the interpreter.
I'm sorry, I did miss that as I was seeking
My
translation.
motion references the discussion on the work plan,
Okay.
not and the witness list, not with respect to the motions that Mr. Fortin has brought forward.
So that I'm clear and that nobody thinks there's any shenanigans going on, are you moving to go in motion at this moment?
No, when
No.
we get to the point in the agenda to
Thank
deal
you.
with the witness list
Okay.
and the work plan.
Thank you. So we still have motions. We will now move the floor to Mr. Riel. The floor is yours. Mr. Fortin, my apologies.
Sorry, Mr. Chair,
No
point of order.
problem, Mr. Mathieu.
What is the point of order?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I thought that my intervention was to move that we discuss the work plan, and you said
No,
that
you
that
didn't
is
move
what...
that motion accordingly. You made an intervention and you shared your opinion with the committee. The committee heard your opinion and we moved to...
You indicated that the purpose of this meeting was to discuss the work plan, and now
It was a
we're moving-
business meeting, as identified in the agenda. If there's any confusion around the notice of the agenda, I would just ask you to reflect back on that notice. We had Mr. Senator Harder have his intervention, and now we have Mr. Fortin. Sir, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I indicated that I have 2 motions, and I provided them, and I think you all have them in both official languages this week. The first deals with the documents, whereas given the many passages in the many documents that we've received regarding the production of all security assessments and legal opinions which the government relied upon to justify the emergency declared on February 15, 2022 have been redacted. It is agreed that each department person and or agency that produced documents with redacted documents be required to provide the committee with an unredacted version of those documents or an explanation of the grounds for each redaction within 10 days of the adoption of the motion. I think that we don't need to discuss it further. I think that the motion speaks for itself. We need complete documents, and if they can't be complete, there should be an explanation.
Senator Harder?
Chair, and thank you, Mr. Fortin. My view on this motion is I'm not opposed to the motion, but I think we should be realistic as to what our expectations ought to be. I think it is unusual and perhaps a step too far to ask officials to come with unredacted documents. Those documents are by definition secure and classified. I have no objection to having them come and speak to the redaction, but I can't imagine that they would come and table unredacted documents, and I doubt that they would be coming here to say we made a mistake with respect to the redactions and are prepared to provide a greater unredaction. But I'm not opposed to the motion. I just want us to not build up expectations in our minds or anybody else's that there wasn't due consideration given by officials to the redaction process.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I too support the motion and its intent. I would just, those of you who've ever been in a situation in a court where there is redacted documents, there's generally always the expectation that the explanation for those redactions are included in the actual redaction with a table that says it may have been redacted for reason A, and reason A is laid out in another document, the piece of paper that says, it's because of whatever source information from my experience or whatever it might be. So I think it's reasonable that we would have a motion like this that would, in those cases where redactions are done, that they provide the explanation as to why they were redacted and the grounds for them. And as far as, we can ask, as Senator Harder said, we can certainly ask for unredacted documents. That's certainly the expectations this committee had, but we understand that there may be some limitations there.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion on the motion? So at this time, I'd like to move to the vote. Well, we can check. We can test the floor and see if we have
Mr. Chair,
consent.
Mr. Chair, Tariq Farani here.
Yep.
Could I just speak to the you can hear me okay, correct?
Can hear you okay?
Yes, okay, perfect. So just with respect to this this point on Monsieur Fortin's motion, I've just heard what the intervention from Senator Harder, and what I would indicate is that if the people are to be arriving and to be explaining the redactions that they've made, that's one issue. But to arrive with unredacted portions being provided to the committee is not something that I would deem to be suitable or advisable, but rather just having the persons attending. So I would actually move to amend them to amend the motion such that it read that each department person and or agency that produced the documents with redacted portions be required to provide the committee, be required to appear before the committee and provide an explanation on the grounds of each redaction. So omitting the words with an unredacted version of those documents.
Okay, on the amendment, we have Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, with all respect, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the remarks by Mr. Virani, but I think that his amendment is useless because what it says here is to either provide the committee with an unredacted version or provide the explanation. So the witness can decide, oh, I will provide the unredacted version. I think that the motion as written is fine. I agree with Mr. Harder because maybe somebody will come and say that was a mistake. It shouldn't have been redacted, but we should at least have an explanation for any redaction. And I would rather have it in written form, as indicated in the motion. It could be of use to hear from the witnesses, but I think it might be rather tedious to have all these people come before the committee. I think if they send us a written document, that would be easier and more efficient.
Okay, so are there any other interventions on the amendment?
Could I speak to it one more time, Mr. Chair?
Sure can.
Thank you very much. The other point I would make is that in response to the point that was raised by Mr. Mott, and it's a fair point, but when documents are provided and there's an indication of the type of privilege, so in court often you would see things like solicitor-client privilege, but it's just indicated that this portion that is blacked out is under solicitor-client privilege. It's not provided. The text behind the redaction is not provided along with the assertion of the privilege. It's just simply the assertion of the privilege. So that's the first point. But I'd also just like to speak to the point that I do think, given everything that is going on, it's really incumbent upon us to be moving as expeditiously as possible with the hearing of witnesses. I'm not sure if this is the best suited motion to be addressing the redactions, which have been done for what I presume are very valid and legitimate reasons, that actually detracts from the important work of this committee that many of us are eager to get on with. Thank you.
If I could, just on a technical note, Mr. Varani, it doesn't appear that your headset is connected, and it's creating an issue with translation and audio. Can you please ensure that you've selected your headset within the Zoom settings?
Is this better? I apologize. Is that a little bit better for the translation? And for
Is your mic? Yes. Okay. May you please just repeat the wording of your amendment?
Yes, I'm just gonna, it's really loud. I'm gonna turn down my volume. Okay. So the wording of the amendment would simply be to remove the words in the second paragraph that commences "it is agreed." So I would be removing portions of the second line in that second paragraph. So it says, be required to appear before the committee and provide an explanation of the grounds for each redaction. And I believe 10 days may be a bit onerous, so I would actually move that suggest that be switched to 30 days.
If I could, respectfully, I asked you to reread the motion that we've already debated, and you're now in on a second intervention, so you're actually amending your amendment at this point. So the amendment that's on the floor stands at 10 days, not 30 days. That's the debate that we're on right now. You can't just change it on the fly in a second intervention. So with that being said, sorry, we've now heard you restate that motion. That motion is that amendment is on the floor. Do we have any other discussion on that motion? So with that being said, we will go to a vote.
To be clear.
What is your
I believe it is in order for someone to move a sub-amendment to my amendment, and I believe I could move that myself, or another person on the committee can move that.
No, you
Mr.
can't.
Chair.
Okay, so my clarification is right now we are voting on the amendment that's proposed by Mr. Varani.
Correct. The first one that he was asked to restate. That's
Thank
correct. So that is on the floor. We are now in the process of a vote. Thank you.
I believe if there's continued debate on a point of order, Mr. Chair, if there's continued debate on a motion or
Sorry,
potentially-
it's in a non-debatable situation right now because the vote has been invoked. We're now in the process of voting, and so that's non-debatable.
I actually don't think that's correct, Mr. Chair.
That you
I
can
would actually
interrupt a vote? Are you challenging
No,
the chair in
I-
this moment, or?
Yes, because we're in the process of debating, and I was restating the suggested amendment, and you said I can't amend my own amendment, and then one of my colleagues tried to take the floor.
That's not
before
what
you calling
happened.
the vote.
No.
I believe that's what just happened, sir.
Well, I believe differently.
Well,
Yes.
then I'm challenging your decision then.
Okay, so
Because
there's a
it was
vote
also-
now to challenge the chair. So let's do that. We'll challenge that decision on that, and we can take that vote accordingly, and then we can move on.
So the decision of the chair is to proceed to the vote. So the question on to overrule the chair is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? Was the question. The Honourable Senator Boniface.
Agree.
L'Honorable Sénateur Carignan CP.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Carignan votes yes. The Honourable Senator Campbell.
Yes.
And the Honourable Senator Harder.
Monsieur Fortin.
Oui.
Can I vote on this? Can I vote on that? I don't know. Can I? Procedurally? Yeah, but he's challenging me. Okay, obviously, yes. I was just trying to be fair.
Ms. Bendayen.
No.
Mr. Nakvi.
No.
Mr. Verani.
No.
Mr. Lloyd.
I vote to sustain the chair's decision. Yes.
Mr. Mott. Yes. Yeas pool 8, nays contre 3.
We will now proceed with the vote.
Just to clarify now, we're voting on the amendment by Mr. Verani to the motion.
Can you read out the amendment, please, Mr. Clerk?
Yep. So in the second line of the motion, the paragraph that begins with "it is agreed," it would be removing "provide the committee with an unredacted version of the documents," and instead inviting to appear. I just want to make sure that's correct. All right. The Honourable Senator Boniface.
Agree?
L'Honourable Senator Carignan, CP.
No.
The Honourable Senator Campbell.
Agree.
The Honourable Senator Harder.
Agree.
Monsieur Fortin.
Non.
Mr. Green.
No.
Ms. Bendayen.
Oui.
Mr. Nakvi.
Yes.
Mr. Verani.
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd.
No.
Mr. Motz.
No.
Six, 5. Yeas pool 6, nays contre 5.
Okay, we will now proceed to debate on the main motion as amended. Mr. Nakvi, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move an amendment to the amended motion that was just approved. I suggest I move that we change from 10 days to 30 days of the adoption of this motion.
You've heard the amendment as presented by Mr. Nakvi. Is there any debate on the amendment? Mr. Fortin, Monsieur Fortin?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I understand the idea of giving people time if we are asking them to provide unredacted documents, and I can also understand it if we are asking them to provide an explanation for each of the redactions, but I don't know why we would give them 30 days to appear. So if the decision, if I understand correctly, is that we are not asking for unredacted documents, but rather just to appear before the committee and provide the grounds for the redactions, I don't see why we would give them 30 days. We've already delayed things for long enough for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that some witnesses are appearing before the commission. So the issue of redaction could be dealt with as a priority, perhaps next week or the following week. So giving 30 days isn't appropriate. It takes us to the middle of November.
Speakers list Senator Harder, followed by Senator Bendayen. Senator Harder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. The work that we're asking to come before this committee has already been done by virtue of the redaction itself. So I don't see why 10 days is overly burdensome because the work has been done. I hope that there has been a thought process that can be revealed to us. And if for some reason we find out that they need a couple of extra days, we can deal with that. But I'm a little reluctant to give 30 days and hear that on day 29. So I don't think the amendment's necessary, frankly.
Thank you. MP Bendayan, the floor is yours.
Oui, merci. Pour répondre à mon collègue,
Thank you to answer my colleague. I agree that 30 days might be long given the amendment we've just passed, but I think that we could agree perhaps on 15 or 20 days, a little bit more than 10 days, just because we are talking about thousands of documents that they will have to go through to provide us with the information we're asking for. Honestly, I don't think it's quite clear, given what was read, about what we have decided to do in the amendments. I had understood that what you were looking for was information in writing and not for people to appear. So if we could agree on having a written, concise explanation for the redactions provided in writing to us, I think that perhaps you could agree on 15 days instead of 10. I think that we could come to a solution.
Make a procedural note that what you've suggested is a sub-amendment on an amendment, and that would require Mr. Naqvi withdrawing his amendment with unanimous consent of this committee in order to consider yours. Do you understand that to be the same?
Before I consider doing that, I just want to make one point. I mean, we're talking about a lot of documents with perhaps...
This is a procedural point that I make, and you're entering into debate. And so my question to you is, do you want to withdraw that? If not, I'll go to Mr. Fortin, and then I'll come back to you for the debate.
Go to Mr. Fortin and come back
Mr. Fortin, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, personally, I welcome, perhaps even enthusiastically, I am prepared to go with 15 days if we can have written explanations. I can understand that. But my point was just that if we keep the amendment that was just passed and had people appear, then I don't know why we would wait 30 days. But if you say that you are prepared to go back on that amendment and propose something else, that we could have written explanations, then I think that we could work out the number of days.
Mr. Naqvi, you had indicated you were on the speaker's list. If you would like to remain on the speaker's list, the floor is yours. If not, I'll proceed to Ms. Bendayan.
So thank you. So the point I want to make, first of all, the motion says within 30 days. It does not say after 30 days. So it gives us the latitude between now and within 30 days to be able to schedule individuals to appear, as the motion reads at this moment, and explain the redaction. We've seen the challenges associated with scheduling people to come before this committee. So giving us some time frame will help our clerks to get the right people in front of the committee, number one. Number two, if you stick with 10 days as being proposed, for example, that's probably just one committee by my calculation that will require people to come. So right there, I think we are setting ourselves for failure in terms of getting people up here before to explain those redactions. So my suggestion was more of a practical nature. If folks feel more comfortable with 15 days and they think that we can get the work done with the appearing part, then 15 days with just documents being submitted, then we can I can move that sub-amendment if it's agreeable to folks.
So you have an amendment on the floor, and I'm just going to recap so that we're all clear that the reference to appearances was not limited to being within 10 days. What was within 10 days was the explanation for the redactions. So I just want to make sure we're not, as we're getting into amendments and sub-amendments on sub-amendments, we're not losing what's before us here. And so I guess what I'll ask you to stay in process, Mr. Naqvi, are you withdrawing your amendment?
I'm willing to withdraw and suggest another sub-amendment that takes into account what Mr. Fortin was suggesting.
Okay, so, right, well,
And
you can withdraw. and
My
we
hand
can
is raised, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so there is a speaker's list, Mr. Varani. Thank you. You're on it. Mr. Naqvi, are you withdrawing your amendment so we can proceed? Because you can't do a conditional withdrawal. You just have to withdraw your amendment, and then we'll discuss it. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but procedurally,
Well, can I hear the views of others before I
if they
tell
want to give you
Yes,
the views, or if we
yeah,
just want to move on.
Yeah.
You can't do
Are there any other people
Or,
on the speakers
or
list?
we can take a little break and then just hash it out. Do you want to do that?
Okay,
let's
let's
do that.
do a 5-minute recess so that we can hash it out. I will proceed to Mr. Naqvi. Mr. Naqvi, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, I will withdraw my amendment of saying within 30 days. And I think you will find unanimous consent to the following wording. In its entirety, the second paragraph would read, "It is agreed that each department, person, and/or agency that produced documents with redacted portions be required to provide the committee with an explanation of the grounds for each redaction in writing within 15 days.
Just looking around the table, wow, I will take that. We have unanimous consent on that motion, and so let the record show. We are now back to the main body of the agenda, which is committee business. We are now in the main body of the committee, which is committee business, and it is appropriate for you at this time to move a motion if you see fit, sir. The floor is yours.
Est-ce que, Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, shall we consider the motion to have been adopted as amended by Mr. Naqvi? Okay, we had unanimous consent.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I certainly don't mean to make your life difficult, and if you recognize Mr. Fortin first, that is fine. But if we were moving back to the general list, Mr. Fortin indicated he still had the floor to move another motion after a vote.
Mr. Fortin had an intervention. He caught my attention. We exchanged words. Therefore, he had the floor. So after I'm in a conversation with somebody who has the floor, I take a scan around the room to see whose hands are up. I did recognize your hand being up after I was already engaged with Mr. Fortin, and I was explaining to him that we are in the main part of the committee business. But understanding quite rightly that the amendment had been withdrawn and redrafted through unanimous consent, we are now on the body of the main motion. Correct?
je comprends qu'elle a été adoptée.
I understand that it was adopted unanimously, but I have another motion. Inaudible for the interpreter.
So, look, I want to make this very clear that when things get complicated like this, it's my role as the chair to ensure that there's procedural fairness. And given that there has been unreadiness around the nature of the unanimous consent on the amendment, we do have procedurally to go back to the main motion as amended for consideration, debate, or vote. So what I'll do at this time is I will test the room to see if we have unanimous consent on the main motion as amended.
Je peux y aller, Monsieur le Président?
Can I go ahead with my second motion?
That one was kind of a draw, I'm not going to lie. You both kind of put your hands up at the same time.
Non, mais Monsieur le Président, j'avais le...
But Mr. Chairman, I had the floor for my two motions. When I asked for the floor, initially it was for my two motions, and
procedurally, you had the floor in a moment prior to us acknowledging the body of the main motion. That's what happened. Once the main motion is passed, we don't keep a speaker's list from previous agenda items. The floor is then open for consideration of committee.
Je comprends, Monsieur le Président. Ce que je disais...
I understand, Mr. Chairman, but what I'm saying is when I asked for the floor, when the senator said that it would be good to go in camera to discuss our work plan, we decided that first we would deal with my two motions, and I started by saying I will first go ahead with my first motion. And so, logically, I should be able to go to my second motion next.
Thank you. Just so that we're clear, there was not a concession that your motions both would be dealt with consecutively. There is a time in an agenda for motions. All members equally have the right to present motions. That is part of a business meeting. And so now I'm left with a bit of a situation with recognizing and making sure that members of this committee are duly recognized.
C'est votre décision, Monsieur le Président. Je m'en...
It's your decision, Mr. Chairman, and I respect that.
Deux motions.
But I did say that I had two motions.
That doesn't mean that you reserve the right to move them in a consecutive way. And so given the nature and tone of this meeting, I think procedurally it would be fair if I turn to Ms. Bendayan to see what Ms. Bendayan had for this committee's business.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, I would like to see on the table, and I will make a motion to that effect if you like, I would like to call for a discussion of our witnesses and our work plan for the next few weeks. I understand that the senator raised that he had a motion for going in camera for that purpose, but I would like to start the discussion now of the witnesses because it's important for our work.
That we would deal with the scheduling portion after we dealt with the substantive motions, and so I would rule that motion out of order. It's dilatory given that he's already presented that motion, and we agreed that that would be the case.
Who agreed when you say we agreed?
I agreed in a ruling that we would move forward with the motions.
Thank you. So it was your decision, Mr. Chair.
It was the decision of the committee. Nobody objected to it. So with that being said, Mr. Fortin, the floor is yours.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very quick. It's the second motion, that was provided to everyone this week, and I will read it. Whereas the Honorable Paul S. Rouleau is currently presiding over the public inquiry into the declaration of emergency issued in 2022, the Rouleau Commission, pursuant to the Order in Council of April 25th, 2022, which was adopted to meet the provisions of Section 163 of the Emergencies Act, whereas the Commission is scheduled to sit from October 13th, 2022 to November 25th, 2022, whereas these hearings are public, whereas the evidence and documents produced before the Commission are of great interest to the members of the Joint Committee and may have a significant impact on the work of the Joint Committee, including the summoning of witnesses. It is agreed that an analyst be assigned to the work of the Joint Committee to monitor the work of the Rouleau Commission and report back to the committee with a summary of each day's work, including the names of the witnesses heard and a brief summary of the information provided by the witnesses and the documents produced. So once again, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to repeat what I've said in the motion, but just to point out that the Commission is working on the same topic, on the same events that we are investigating. And so I think it would be a bit neglectful if we didn't take into account the information that is provided to the Commission, the documents, the witness testimony, and so on. So if we want to carry out our mandate effectively, we need to monitor those hearings. And I think an analyst should do that because we can all follow what is going on and we can take information that supports our own views. And we could discuss those views for a long time. But if we have a neutral analyst that will listen and provide an objective report on what is said before the Commission, I think that we can save time and we can decide whether we want to use the testimony. If we need to, we can call those witnesses so that they can tell us what they've told the Rouleau Commission, or we can ask additional questions if we want to. But we should not ignore what is being done by the Rouleau Commission if we want to be effective.
I have Mr. Motz, and I'm going to put myself on the list after that. So, Senator Boniface, after Mr. Motz, I'd like for you to take the floor. Mr. Motz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I appreciate the intent of the motion, and I do support its intent. I think the only concern that I might have is the capacity of the analyst, and so we don't run the Library of Parliament. We don't manage their analysts for us, but we do have, and we've given ourselves the ability to retain counsel should we wish, or to retain some outside capacity, and I think that is something we should consider as a chair. I agree with the intent of the motion. I think we need to have that data. I don't know if we need to have it daily, but I think it should be reported to the committee on a regular basis, maybe weekly. but we need to have the capacity for someone to do it and do it well. And I don't know whether analysts have that capacity, and I don't think we should burden them with that side of it as well. And so, therefore, I would. That's my intervention at this time. And if we have to move an amendment, I will do so after some more interventions.
Thank you. Senator Boniface, if I can pass the floor to you to chair.
Mr. Green, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would concur in the spirit that I believe that we need a mechanism in place that would receive the substantive information, documents, evidentiary proceedings of not just the commission, but also, in my opinion, some of the civil proceedings to help us get greater disclosure that we have been unable to be provided to this committee from the government. However, I don't think that it is feasible to have staff do daily reviews in the proceedings. I myself have tried. These are 9 hours a day on the inquiry with lots of information, and I just don't know that it's feasible to have daily reports on witnesses and summaries to that effect. However, I think the documents and evidence that are presented, there could be a process, whether it be weekly or whatever would seem most feasible, to allow us to get that information to be part of our reports and part of our summaries. And maybe there's a point in time in this committee that we set aside specifically to look at the findings of that inquiry, because I think it's safe to say that we will not be wrapped up likely before that happens, given our scheduling challenges here. So with that being said, I personally can't support this as it's presented, just given some of the institutional challenges. I will make one more note here, that I have been informed that if we do want to go outside to get some kind of consultant's support on this, that is a much longer process, and it's one most likely bound by the collective agreements of the Hill that would suggest that we would need to prove that that's not something that could be done here. And so, from a labor perspective, as a good New Democrat, I would flag that. We don't want to be in a process. I will not be in a process as chair where I'm getting grieved by the committee. So with that being said, I will end my comments there and take the chair back. And we have Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are now back as chair. Mr. Chairman, what I just wanted to ask is, well, this isn't asking for an analyst to report back to us daily, but rather to a summary of every day's work.
Every day. Donc, je pense que c'est important. Il y a quand même une distinction.
I think there's a distinction, and an important one to make there. I don't have any trouble with a daily report, but the idea is to have a summary of every day. And so we have all the members here. We all need to know what is going on. I understand what you are saying, though, Mr. Chairman, about the collective agreements and so on. And that's why, rather one of the reasons that I am suggesting an analyst, and I have no trouble with the idea of finding someone outside our institution. And we know that we're going to be doing our work, or rather the commission will be ending on November 25th, so we have to act quickly, and that's a problem. If the analysts can't do that, if there's a lack of resources, then I'm sure that we should be able to hire someone. I don't think that the committee should get involved in collective agreements and worries about that, because otherwise we won't be able to do our work. But this is quite urgent, given that the commission has been sitting every day since October 13th. It's already a week. And so we should make a decision tonight, and we should trust the analysts and assume that somebody can do that work and do a summary of every day's proceedings.
Administrative comment, as we're now coming up on 7:30, to be expeditious with your statements if it's your intention that we get to scheduling. It's all within your rights to speak as long as you want, but just know the more we're speaking on our motions, particularly our own, gives us less time to get, we're going to have an hour left to deal with the scheduling. So that we're clear, on the speakers list is Senator Carignan, followed by Mr. Virani, followed by Senator Harder. Monsieur Carignan, the floor is yours.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. I just want a point of clarification. If I understand correctly, the testimony before the Rouleau Commission is transcribed and is therefore available on the website. So automatically, that is part of the evidence before us. We have adopted a motion to the effect that the evidence, including the testimony and the documents received by standing committees and published on their websites, are part of our evidence. So I'm just summarizing that. So perhaps this is a question for the clerk. So is it not the case that everything said before the Rouleau Commission is part of the evidence that we can use? So I really want to understand that I've understood the meaning of the motion we adopted at the beginning of our work. Because if we have the transcript, it could be useful to have a summary and have somebody present that. But if we have the transcript, at least we have that.
So, Mr. Carignan, is it your request that we have the clerk comment on that, just for your
Oui,
assurance?
pour être certain que j'ai bien.
Yes, I want to understand if I have understood properly the meaning of the motion that we adopted, that the Commission's work is part of our testimony or evidence.
Je dirais juste
Thank you, Senator Carignan. I would just say that all of the information is published, and so that can be used by the committee here.
Pas nécessairement.
So it's not necessarily introduced as evidence before our committee. It isn't really part of our evidence. Is that correct? Yes. So maybe we should have that as a motion. Thank you.
Thank you for the consideration. We have Mr. Virani, followed by Senator Harder. Mr. Virani, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just following on up on what Senator Carignan was just mentioning, it would seem to my mind that it makes the present motion somewhat redundant if the evidence is already before the committee, effectively based on what we passed at previous meetings. What that means is that what Monsieur Fortin seems to be asking for is just for an analyst to be assigned to summarize that same evidence. And I guess to that point, I would actually ask, through you, Mr. Chair, ask for the analyst's input, going back to what Mr. Motz had raised, so that the analysts can provide us at this committee tonight, if they could just give us a sense of their own wherewithal to actually do this additional work. And I'm still curious as to whether there may be a sub-amendment or an amendment that's being proposed by Mr. Motz. But if we could first perhaps hear from the analysts about their capacity to do exactly what is being asked, because I am sensitive to the point that was raised by Mr. Motz and others about their workload currently. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, I would just like a clarification. Could the clerk read the motion that Senator Carignan mentioned? Because I don't have that in front of me.
Well, I'm sorry. At this time, Mr. Virani has the floor, and so I can come back to you. But he put a question specifically to the analyst. I would like for Mr. Virani to have that question answered. If there's further questions for the committee, we can address that at that appropriate time. Colin, please.
All right, thank you for the question. So we are aware, we were aware of the motion, and we have discussed it internally. So like has been mentioned, it's mostly a question of resources. I guess the main point is that we just don't, we aren't fully certain how long this would take us to get out there, and given that it's an ongoing process, the amount builds up. But we are working on it. It's just we can't give a very certain deadline at this point.
Just as a chair's note, for the consideration of committee, there may be a possibility of us having the analyst report back with a bit of a feasibility. Otherwise, we are essentially debating something that we don't even quite know or fully understand if we have the capacity of. I'll just put that there. It's not a motion, but I just for your consideration that they may be able to report back to this committee with the feasibility on this. We do have, just so that I'm clear, Mr. Varani, your intervention is complete with that question?
Yes. I mean, I don't find. I mean, the answer wasn't perhaps as robust as I would have liked, but I feel like the analyst is being a bit diplomatic there, because I know they are working pretty hard all the time, and we know that if there's 9 hours of evidence a day, that's a lot of evidence to go through. Okay. But thank you for having my question answered, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. We'll pass the floor. We will now proceed to Senator Harder. Followed by Senator Harder, we'll have Mr. Motz. Senator Harder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to propose that we adjourn this discussion and invite the analysts to consult as to whether or not it would be possible for analysts to be dedicated to perform this task. I think it's an important piece. And when we hear that, I would hope that the analysts can speak to all of the co-chairs to come up with a solution that would allow the committee to receive a report on the work being done at the commission.
Just procedurally, so that we're clear, adjournments on discussions are non-debatable motions. So we do have a motion on the floor. I'll test the committee.
If I could, not.
It's non-debatable.
Well, I'm not really debating it. I'm going to add to it.
Well, you can add to it after it's passed or defeated. That would be the essence of it being non-debatable. So I will test the will to see if we have infinite wisdom provided by the Senate to adjourn debate on this discussion. Is there unanimous consent to that, or would you prefer to proceed to a recorded vote? Is there any in opposition? Let's make this clear. Okay. So we have unanimous consent to adjourn the discussion. We are still in general business on that particular one. We are still in general business. Consider your questions and comments. Feel free at this time, Mr. Motz, to make followed by Ms. Bendian. Mr. Motz, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just to add to what the Senator Harder had proposed. I'm not opposed to that, but I think I would have preferred we had a bit of parameter around what we're asking the analysts to do. And it may be, if our analyst goes back and has the conversation, it might be appropriate if we as a committee say, we have 8, 9, 10 hours a day in commission hearings, sometimes 400 plus pages and documents. And what is our expectation? The analysts have to know what it is that we expect before they can give an informed comment back. And I was hoping that we could just give them that to say, listen, we don't have to have it the day of. It can be a week later or whatever that looks like. But I'm just suggesting that if we have some of those parameters around what we expect the analyst to provide us, we're going to get a more wholesome and a better response back that may be more favorable to the committee. That's all.
Thank you for that intervention, that comment on the proceedings of the previous non-debatable motion. They do have at their disposal, just so that we're clear, our analysts are here. They are privy to our discussions. They understand the spirit and intent, I believe, of the discussions. They also have the ability to reference transcripts, as does the Library of Parliament, to be able to come up with, the recommendations pursuant to the spirit of the motion that's at hand. So with that being said, are there any other motions in this? Oh, sorry. We had Ms. Bendian, and then we'll go to Senator Harder. My apologies, Ms. Bendian. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see clarification from the clerk further to the exchange that occurred with Senator Carignan. Senator Carignan was referring back to a motion that was adopted by this committee on September 22nd. And I'll read the beginning because it seems quite clear to me that the committee deemed the evidence, including the testimony and documents received by and published on the websites of other standing committees of the House of Commons and the Public Order Emergency Commission. So the inquiry that that Senator Carignan was just asking about in relation to the invocation of the Emergencies Act. And so the plain reading of the motion for me would indicate that the testimony that is heard every day that Senator Carignan referred to is indeed deemed part of our record. Can you perhaps give us a little bit more clarification?
That is correct. I misspoke earlier. I reread the motion, and I agree that it is, by that motion, it would be deemed to us.
Sénateur Carignan, vous pouvez me remercier plus tard.
So Senator Carignan can thank me for that.
Very helpful.
Now have Senator Harder, followed by Senator Carignan.
Colleagues, in the event that anybody is still watching, I would propose that the committee move in camera for the purpose of discussing witnesses and the committee's work plan.
Do we have unanimous consent? Are any opposed?
Monsieur le Président, je
Mr. Chairman, I understand that this idea might not be a good one, but I oppose the idea of going in camera. I think that our work should be public as much as possible, and so, unfortunately, perhaps, I am going to oppose the motion.
Would you be okay with this being passed on division, or would you require on division? That's good. I now move that this committee meeting go in camera. We're going to take about a 5 to 8. We're going to take a 10-minute break.
You have to announce that a new login code will be sent out.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, or point of clarification?
You're going to be sent out a new link that will provide you with a secure Zoom connection to the committee meeting. We'll give you 10 minutes to receive that information, to log out and log back on. I assure the members that we will provide as much time and technical support to make sure the transition is smooth. This meeting is now suspended until we come back in camera.